But then I cut out my first year out ewes a couple weeks ago, and I put them in a pasture there at Lake Creek, and I lost a ewe and a lamb the first night. And I had a herder there with them, and he said there was a bunch of dogs in the herd, and he goes, I got them out. I said, oh, okay. And so I went and talked to all the neighbors, and I said, do you have any big dogs? Do you think you had your dogs in last night? I said, can I look at your dogs, or would you look at your dogs? And make sure they don't have blood on them. If they, just keep your dogs in, you know. I tried to. And the old school wouldn't have been that way. Wouldn't have been that very nice at all. But I'm in a neighborhood that's near Vail, and I had to talk to everybody, like, given a little bit of an education. Anyway, the next night we lost 4 ewes. And then the next night I lost another ewe. And then my local wildlife guy, not Wildlife Services, who's our trappers, but more the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, he came in and brought a bear trap, and he took that bear the next morning, and I've been building this community, you know, I mean, for like 30 years, and I was sure people weren't going to appreciate that we'd taken this bear, and I wasn't sure how everybody was going to respond to it, and when they found out that we'd taken that bear, I got all these calls that said, oh my God, that bear's been in my garage. It's been on my deck. We've been so scared of that bear. But they couldn't do anything about it because it wasn't bothering livestock. And they're very appreciative we actually took that bear. Now, if you don't know, on the other hand, you can find folks that they're worried that you're taking another bear. But this bear, he was very arrogant, and he'd been already educated by people and their trash cans. And he would only, that's where he lived, is on people's trash cans. And he found easy prey when my sheep came in. So we deal with that kind of, those kind of folks and that kind of situation all the time. And so I'm not as hard ass as most of my cohorts and all those Greeks and Basques. I'm really, I can be, but I mostly like the food of the Basques and the Greeks. Like that's.
And the ouzo.
Oh yeah, we forgot the vino and ouzo.
Yeah, the vino or the ouzo. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, good.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Kind of turn it around on this next question and ask, what are the opportunities you see moving forward in our industry? We'll jump right back to you, Julie,
Yeah.
if that's all right.
Well, Andrea was at our Colorado Wool Growers Convention in July. She talked about defensible space for people's houses, for HOAs. And our wool growers, I mean, I thought they were going to give her a standing ovation. I mean, they go, wow, you know, they're paying you to graze, and they're appreciating you as graziers. And we've known that we can really accomplish a goal with grazing. We can manage our brush. We can manage certain weed species. We can manage like overgrowth. We can manage what that HOA or what those associations need, and we can graze under solar panels. I mean, there's so many things we can do with sheep and goats. We don't really have enough sheep and goats, so I think that's the huge opportunity. In the meantime, we're going to continue probably grazing like we have been. In my neck of the woods, a lot of people need an ag exemption, good or bad. I have a lot of really good leases because people have had these properties for years. They're not the folks that came in and bought them. They've just like staying there, and to keep their 200 acres agricultural, it would make them sell it if they had to pay the taxes. And so I can graze that for agriculture purposes. So in my county, in my area near Eagle County, Colorado, that works pretty good, and I have some really nice leases before I go up on the forest. So I think there's a lot of opportunities with grazing. And wool, I think the world's the limit on wool. If you throw out your polyester sweater on the side of the road, it's still going to be there in 20 years. If you throw out your wool sweater, it's going to, I bet you've never thought about this, but it'll actually go back into the soil. It'll add nutrients to the soil. I mean, it's something that once you wear it and you're done with it, you can recycle it a couple times with your family, maybe for a blanket for your dog, and then you can recycle it through your soils. And It's just it's an amazing product that comes off the back of a sheep. So I think there's all kinds of opportunities there. Yeah.
Marcia.
Yeah, I agree. Our ranch is just outside the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, we're basically in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. And what I see there is incredible opportunity. I'm a very small producer. I sell all of my lamb direct to consumer, direct to people for freezer lamb. And people really want to know where their food comes from. You know, they want to have a relationship with the producer, and I think there's a huge opportunity for a lot more growth there. There's some producers in my area that are, you know, quite large for our area. They're still small producers, but they're making a good living with sheep and cattle and selling direct to consumer, selling to restaurants. Their name is on the restaurant menu. People know that ranch. They know where that meat came from. I'm involved with a co-op that has just produced a local slaughterhouse to have a local slaughter opportunity for small producers in our area. And I've gotten to know a lot of producers who require USDA slaughter because they're selling meat retail. They're selling their meat at farmers markets, or they're selling to restaurants, and they're making a good living doing it. I think also wool, like you said. I'm part of a group called the Northern California Fiber Shed. It was the first fiber shed, although they've spawned a lot of other fiber sheds around the country. And these are organizations that educate people about the environmental damage of artificial fibers, of synthetic fibers and synthetic dyes, and the environmental benefits of wool and natural fibers, and really promote you know, like you say, slow fashion, the sweater that you recycle and that you value, and it's catching on. People are understanding this, and I think and also, like you were saying, FiberShed has a climate beneficial wool brand, because a lot of people think of grazing animals as the evil empire in terms of, you know, climate destruction. But actually, properly grazing land, you incorporate carbon, and it can be carbon negative, and you can have climate beneficial. When people realize that, they want to eat those animals that were raised that way. They want to wear that wool that was grown that way. And so I think in careful branding, there's a lot of opportunity, and educating the public every opportunity that we get, so people have a better understanding of what they're supporting when they're perhaps spending more money on a product, more money on that meat, or more money on that wool sweater or that yarn to knit that sweater, but knowing that it was grown in a sustainable way and they're supporting something much bigger with that. There's a lot of pride and satisfaction that people take out of that. So I think that in general, the sheep industry can benefit.
Good.
Very good point about the carbon sequestration.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good point.
That's something we have to
Yep.
keep pointing out.
I'm glad you
Andre.
mentioned that. The carbon cycle, once you think about it, it's one of those things. Well, I figured this out shortly after I realized I was in targeted grazing and what I was doing, that, you know, once you see what livestock does to the land, you can't unsee it. It makes so much sense. And when you think about the carbon cycle and the sun through photosynthesis turning sunlight into food and fiber, all while adding carbon, taking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it back into the soil, it's the most pure thing you can think about. And grazing animals have gotten and still do get a bad rap in a lot of realms, but things like this are opportunity for our industry, because once you get the opportunity to share that information and really educate people about it, I've got to think I'm not the only person that thinks, wow, I never thought of it that way, and you can't see it any differently from that point forward. The other thing that I think is opportunity, and I'll pass it to Bianca after this, is in California in particular, really promoting the benefits of grazing and using grazing on areas like solar fields, which are going to be growing tremendously in California, grazing underneath the solar panels. Grazing, I'll let Bianca talk about the details of the grazing. We've been able to incorporate the wool sheep, so from Talbot Sheep Company, there are periods in the shoulder season, so like on the way to the high country and on the way back now, where we're grazing orchards for farmers that are turning to regenerative farming and really want livestock on the land. They're planting cover crops, and they really want livestock at a certain point. And so we're figuring out how to work it into our cycle. So on the way from the low country to the high country, they're spending 30 days in olive orchards, and then heading up to the high country. So it does require another layer of management to really pull all of that off. Bianca and I couldn't be sitting here if we didn't have Emilio at home, our foreman. He couldn't, and our company wouldn't be where it was today if Emilio didn't have us. You know, so it really does take another layer of management, and you have to be thinking about getting out and trying new things. I told Bianca, you know, a lot of commercial sheep in our area, at least, a lot of commercial sheep businesses and family operations, for a lot of wonderful romantic reasons, you know, shearing time or castrating time or shipping time, you know, the wives and mothers would spend days in the kitchen and bring out the meals, and that would be the job. Well, I told Bianca early on, we're not going to grow this company frying chicken in the kitchen. That's not how it's going to happen. And I don't have anything against that, but it's just that I knew.
She's not very good at it.
I'm not good at it. But I knew that that's not where our skills were going to be most beneficial, and we weren't going to grow it doing it that way. So I'll pass it on to you.
And Bianca, I'm just going to ask too that before we move into the question and answer period, that in finishing up your comments there, we'll finish with you. So I'd ask you to, as you represent the newest generation in our industry, to kind of incorporate with what you're going to talk about, your hopes and desires as the future of the industry.
Yeah. I will say, you know, I'm the 4th generation of our family sheep operation. I'm the 1st generation of women in our family to do this as their sole career from the beginning. Yeah. You know, we recently had an opportunity in California through Humboldt State. They're putting together a book of California ranching families, and it was a long deal. I think it's happening. I'm not really sure. But my cousin who's here tonight and I got to write down our family history, which is a great excuse. I challenge every one of you to go home and just put it down. Write it down because you want it. And it was a really great thing for us to do. But at the end of it, we came up with this beautiful story of our family, and mostly of my grandmothers and great-grandmothers who had total other careers and responsibilities, but also kept the thing going. Just because you're out there watching the sheep all day doesn't mean, you know, the check's being mailed, or that you're cashing the check, or that all these other tasks are being done. And, you know, the business doesn't run if that's not happening. And we publicly put it on our website. And a lot of other sheep ranchers that we know, or I didn't even know, that my grandfather knew, read it, saw it online and read it. And I got an opportunity to talk to someone who called me and said, who I've never met, and he's a friend of my grandfather's, and said, you know, I really love reading your story. And he got emotional. He said it was the first time anyone gave credit to someone like my mother. That was what she did. She never got the credit for it. And, you know, that's really important. It makes me emotional just thinking about it. That's really important.
Yep.
You know, we're all up here today because we love it. It's really hard. There's a lot of problems. It's really hard and really complicated. There's a ton of opportunity. I mean, she just said it. I don't have special sheep. My sheep are no different than her sheep. Her sheep do the same thing for the land that mine do. It's all marketing. It's all branding. I just get to talk about it better. And we're in a really unique time in this world where the public is interested in. You're here. You're interested in it. A lot of you probably don't come from sheep backgrounds, but you came to this. This, like you said, this is an amazing opportunity to tell our stories because people love a story. We were in Vogue a year ago, for sheep. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. But, you know, the sheep industry is in this really unique place where people are really inspired just to hear our story, and the fact that we're still around, because it's kind of amazing when you look at the downslope of the industry. The fact that we're still here is crazy. I said it recently, but this is an industry who's tried to fail a million times. You know, we just won't let it.
Let me interject. She said to me, because there's been some really challenging things, particularly in California lately, and she's living it every time she's around me because I'm in the middle of it. And she said to me, really, is this whole thing coming down? And I said, I don't think so. I said, think about it. As long as this industry's been around, what are the odds it's going down on our watch?
Yeah.
You know? So we're going to be here.
Yeah. But you know, every one of us up here runs our operation differently, and we're all trying different things, and that's the beauty of it. There's so many different ways that you can be a part of this. Every year there's more and more small farm flocks, and they're thriving because there's plenty of room for it all across the country. And you know, back to the carbon thing, we had a really funny interaction because we do work with a lot of HOAs. This is one of my mother's favorite stories, but we went, and I don't believe we had started the job yet. We still work with these people. They're big fans, but we came in and we're not grazing like people's lawn. It's wild open interface right behind their homes. And I don't know if we had grazed it yet, but my mom went and did a presentation and for the board. And the goal was we were going to be grazing all it down. So we're moving the grass, limbing up the brush, limbing up the trees. The goats especially are really crazy, do a really good job of that. And you know, after that, they're left with very little vegetation, still vegetation, but much less. And so if a fire were to come, it would either slow when it hit that because there's not enough fuel for it to burn, or it might even stop. Either way, it gives the firefighters a chance to even get in there to fight that fire. And they were like, that's great. That's all great. Sounds wonderful. But what about the poop? Do you pick it up? How does that? And thank God she was quick. She was quick.
I was not expecting that. And I said, well, you know, actually, that's one of the benefits. It stays there.
It's the carbon, right?
It's going back in. You know? And he went, oh.
Yeah.
End of discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quick. And we still work for them.
Yeah.
But,
it's just a fact. That's the way it works. Yeah. You just have, once they see it that way, they're like, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense, you know.
Yeah. But you know, I think when you're asking about the next generation and opportunities and where I think it's going, but there are less people of my generation getting back into their family sheep operations. But you know, there's a lot of new people coming in. There's a lot of opportunity for new folks who probably don't have the family trauma of being in the sheep industry for 100 years. They don't know yet, but they're joining. You know, they're coming in.
They don't know what they don't know.
They don't know what they don't, and we're not telling them.
It.
We're not telling them. But you know, there's a really amazing opportunity to tell your story. I mean, we're here today. We work in a lot of really urban places who've never had livestock in their neighborhood. Why would you? They assume I live in the middle of a ranch. I live in the middle of town. Granted, I'm in the Central Valley of California, but I don't even get to have my sheep in my backyard, and they do. In their backyards in these cities, in these towns, in these really urban spaces, or all around, you know, UC Berkeley, in the middle of the Berkeley Hills, Santa Cruz. They're down at the Reagan Library in San Diego. They're in Marin County, north of San Francisco. I mean, all over the place. And it's a really, really unique opportunity to be up close and personal with folks who've never had an experience with sheep or goats or livestock guardian dogs or border collies, and all of a sudden we're in your backyard every day, 24 hours a day. The sheep don't leave at nighttime, they're there. And it's an amazing opportunity to get to talk to people and educate people and do field trips at schools, and kids are the best. No offense, but adults are rough. None of you will ever read my sign that says, don't touch the electric fence. No one's gonna look at the thing that says there's a guard dog on duty. They're gonna bark at you. But kids absorb all that, probably because the sign is eye level. But kids absorb that and they love it, and they'll ride their bikes every day to go see the sheep or the goats because they're there, and they come tell their friends, and then they'll go to school and tell all their friends, and then they're gonna go home and tell their parents. And then their parents look us up and they're like, wow, this is great. This is amazing. I'm so proud of my town for doing this. I'm so proud of my county for participating, my water district, my utilities district. And it's a really unique opportunity. And you know, as sheep ranchers today, we're in a new position where we have to be able to communicate with the public because we're in it. The public is everywhere. In California, our coyotes are pretty bad. My number one predator is a person with a doodle. Because they're everywhere. You probably have them tonight. We have one in the family. Trust me, I know it well. But they're there, they're out, they touch your fence, they want to. I'm blocking their favorite hiking trail, and so they think they'll just knock over the fence and go in. And well, now you have 400 goats walking down your street. But you have to be able to communicate, and you have to be able to advocate, not for yourself, but for the whole industry, because whatever Marsha's doing affects me. If she's doing a good job and taking care of her sheep and running a good up business and making a good impact on the land, that's going to have a positive impact on me, because someone might have bought her cheese once or bought her yarn someday, and they're going to think, wow, she does an amazing job of raising sheep. I wonder if these folks do. We all have to work together and advocate for the industry, not just in my county or in my city or in even my state. And it's a really unique spot to be, a really unique time to be in the industry, because we're kind of getting quite a bit of attention now. And the opportunity to communicate and advocate and educate is enormous, if not the most important thing we do today.
Very, very, very well said. And your comment about the young people enjoying it and being the most fun to work with and whatnot went back immediately to my childhood. And, the challenge always was, with an electric fence, was to get your buddy to pee on the fence. But I don't know if you noticed it here tonight, folks, but Samuel, our soundsman up there, who's done a tremendous job of keeping us all from squeaking and squawking tonight, he said, one of my biggest concerns is, he says, you got to be really careful and not use your hands a lot and whatnot. Well, if you've been around us Bascos very much, you know the old saying of, if you cut a Basco's arms off, he can't speak. But, and that reminded me, and just thinking of that as I was watching everybody up here gesturing and everything, of a good friend of mine, Tony Chandi, down in Arizona. And Tony was an older fellow, but in the sheep business, and he was stout. And in his 70s, I'd see him take a double roll of page wire and throw it up over the rack of the truck. He was just a bull. But he also spoke with his arms, and if you were in a group and whatnot, and you happened to be standing too close, he would knock you down. Or I did see him clear the coffee table at the local coffee shop 2 or 3 times. The coffee cups go flying. But he was, Bianca talks about all the wonderful people we've got to be with in our industry and whatnot, and he was a classic that way too. But my last story and the Tony Chandi story was, he just bought a brand new pickup just before we came down that winter to start lambing, and I said, Tony, new pickup and whatnot. Yeah, he's pretty proud of it. And about 2 days later, I see him in the back, the tailgate's all bashed in and whatnot. I said, Tony, what happened? Son of a gun, he said, I'm backing up for the chute, And he said, the chute, I'm looking in the mirror, it's a long ways away, so I give it a hell. I go in there, I catch it, and shoot, bam, right now. Well, he was looking in that mirror on the far side that said, objects are closer than they appear.
That was a great one.
Any finishing comments for the group before we start taking questions?
No.
If not, we're going to have, as again I said, we're going to have someone on each side with a microphone. So if you would, ask the question into the microphone so we can hear it. And at this point, we'll just raise your hand and they'll try to get the microphone to you. Looks like we got one here.
Just got one comment, Mike. Don't ever buy a used pickup off a sheep auction.
In case you didn't hear that, sage advice, don't ever buy a used pickup off a sheep operation. I think we got one right here in the front. Do we have some? Oh, okay, we got one just ahead of you. Just a second. Got a couple right down front.
Right here.
Dominique, and that's about, well, I can actually see a little further now. Before the lights didn't allow me to see.
Given all the fires in the Northwest and the West, I would think sheep are a great prevention. And that would be one of, my background is advertising. To me, that would be one of the things I would really hit hard because it's foremost in everyone's mind.
Yep.
And I was just sitting here thinking, and I've seen sheep on the side of freeways, munching away. But I'm thinking and driving out here from Seattle, all the grasslands. And I saw some all big burnt areas too. And I'm thinking, wow, there is an opportunity here.
There is, and at the same time, it's what sheep and goats and cattle have been doing on these landscapes for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of deploying them a little bit more strategically and really deploying them as a tool. But historically, sheep and cattle have reduced more vegetation. They did hundreds of years ago more so than they're doing now, just because their numbers are down.
Right.
So it's just really average. It's getting people to see it differently.
Yep, your point is really well made in the fact that, you know, it's the education process that they talked about as well. And you always want to strike when the iron's hot. And the iron's hottest right after one of those big fires that's gone through and taken out many, many people's homes and livelihoods. I think, was there one? There's a question up on the right here. Okay.
Okay, is this working? Okay. So you were talking earlier about losing the ewes and the mamas and stuff to bears and kind of maybe dogs, wolves, whatnot. And I was wondering, are the herds insured? So when you do incur these losses of you know, your herd, are you reimbursed through insurance?
I can take that for a little while. You can add on.
No, take it, please.
Yep. I don't know of anybody that insures all their sheep. I think that would just be a huge cost to insure, like all your sheep to like predators. But and if there's a game animal, bear or lion, we often have compensation programs in our states, and we do. However, you have to prove. It's an extensive proving stage that you have to have somebody come in to look at the kill and prove that it's a game animal before there's a compensation, and you never find all of them. So there's no widespread insurance unless somebody else knows of something that, especially coyotes or dogs, you just don't find out. That's just a loss.
Yep.
That you have.
No, these depredation funds they're fine, you know, that occur in different states, and every state's different. But the other thing that you have to understand is, you know, after there's been an event like that, whether it's domestic dogs that have been in the herd, whether it's predators such as the type of bear, wolves, coyotes, whatever, there's additional losses that never get compensated for as well. Those lambs that lost their mother, or those mothers that lost their lambs, you know, there's an edginess in that band. They won't herd as well. They won't spread out as well. So there's a loss of gain in weight on those lambs. And so the loss, it's one of those gifts that just keeps on giving, if you will. The loss just exacerbates itself even after that. And so no, Julie's right. Trying to insure for that. First of all, most of the insurance companies don't even know how to put the, I can't think of the term right now, but anyway, to do the algorithms on it to know what the premiums would even be. But they do try to do it through the depredation funds, but it's minimal, the compensation back compared to the loss.
I have a question. I live in a subdivision that's 36,000 acres. We have 3,200 lots, so we have a lot of vacant land. How do you figure out what that's going to cost the HOA? And how do you get your animals to the property to start the work?
I can try. So if there's 3,600 acres, you said? 1,000. So odds are you don't, I mean, depending on the situation, whatever your goal is, because again, this depends on what your goal is as a client, if you're looking for targeted grazing. You may be in a situation where working with a sheep operator to come and graze that entire land is the best situation. However, the other alternative is that you identify a defensible space which can be 100 to 200 to 300 feet out from the back of the homes, and you're grazing like a band all the way around the subdivision to protect if a fire were to come, if that's what you're looking for. Depending on where you're located and the grazers that are available, they probably each have their own way of going about those types of things and can.
What part of California are you in?
We're in the middle of California, but we work throughout the state.
Majority of our work is in the Bay Area and Marin County.
We're in Lake Don, Pedro. You should tell.
Oh, we know it well. Yeah.
Yeah. Love to chat with you.
Yeah.
We've got one right down here in the front. I don't know where the. Oh, you're loud?
Yeah. How do you, this is going to be a dumb question.
No dumb
But
question.
how do you milk a sheep if you have 84? Do you hand milk some and then little suckers on other ones?
And they've asked me to repeat the question too if it isn't on a microphone because they are taping. But her question is, how do you, if you got 84 sheep, how do you milk the sheep? Is it by hand? Do you have a milking machine, or how do you do it?
We have a milking parlor, just like a cow milking parlor, and we had a vacuum pump, and it's milking machines that you go down the line and you put them on the udder. Sheep have 2 teats, so it's just 2 milkers on each one, and it's not. I mean, there's some cow milking parlors that are really automated. Ours was pretty hands-on. The sheep would go up a ramp. We would let them in. They'd all file into their spots in the milking parlor. We'd have 10 at a time, and then the milker would go down the line. First of all, you sanitize the udder because you want that milk to be clean. And then you go and you wipe that iodine off so the iodine doesn't get in the milk. And then you put the units on. And then you sort of watch as you go down the line. So you'd put the units on, a number of them, and then you circle back because they would milk out. And it's bad for that milker to stay on that ewe once her udder's empty. It can cause mastitis and problems. So then you take them off. So you kind of circle your way down the line. And it would take about 10 minutes to milk the 10 ewes that were on the platform. And then you pull up a gate, and they all file out, and then you pull up the gate and the next ones come in. You feed them grain in the milking parlor while you're milking, and so that's why they really want to come in. There was one time when we were, that was also the barn where we kept lambs and mothers during lambing time, and one time somebody left the gate open, and the lambs were just like all over the barn, but the ewes had all gone up the ramp and lined up in the milking parlor, and were just waiting. So they train really well.
I have another. Do you have to worm them every year?
The question being, do you have to worm the sheep every year? And that applies to everyone.
We worm ours every year.
Yeah, I think it's a common practice in the industry is to worm every year because you're generally worming oftentimes right before you start putting the rams into the sheep to help flush the ewes so they'll cycle better.
We have a question right here.
Okay?
Hi. Thank you so much. I've learned so much tonight, and I've been knitting since I was 7 years old, and it's been a big part of my life, and I just feel like there's so much about that I didn't know that I learned tonight, so about wool and about where the wool comes from and all that. I'm also curious about the dog business, and that must be an associated business that has its own legacy. Who trains the sheepdogs, and do you all use sheepdogs? And I'm just curious how about that part of this world. And thank you so much.
I'd like to say something about livestock protection dogs, and then you guys have a lot more to say, I'm sure. But the amazing thing about these livestock protection dogs that we use, I use Great Pyrenees, and they're born with sheep, they're raised with sheep. You want to make sure you get dogs that have been bred to be working dogs and from a line of working dogs. And the woman I buy them from, she keeps them for about 6 months just to make sure that that dog has the good instincts. The behavior is completely bred into them. You don't train them anything. They just go out in the pasture and they go to work. And the complexity of the behavior, if you've got 2 dogs working in a pasture, one will stay with the flock, the other one will do the perimeter work, check the perimeter. If the sheep split into 2 groups, one stays with one goes with the other. The other day I had a ewe that got caught in a feeder, and the dog didn't come to eat because the dog is staying with that ewe that's in trouble. And And it's behavior, it's the genetics of behavior. These dogs have been selected for these behaviors. These dogs have been protecting sheep, the breeds of dogs that do livestock protection, for thousands of years. Dogs were domesticated 12,000 years ago, sheep 10,000. And for a long time, there were no other domesticated animals. It was sheep, dogs, and us. And we had these relationships, and these dogs have protected sheep for so long that the breeds that we use, there's no training involved. They're like partners in my operation. They know what to do, and we just have to respect each other. They don't want to be told what to do. That's my experience with my dogs.
I've run into that a little myself in my own personal life, but did you have any other comments, Julie?
Well, there's some discipline you have to offer to livestock protection dogs, and us on range operations, there's a lot of training with our herders, how to feed them, where to feed them, how to feed them. One guard dog can literally guard their dog food or guard a group of feeding stations, and only one dog gets to eat. And it's a whole management on its own just to take care of your livestock protection dogs. And it's a little bit different than a farm flock, but similar to what you just said is these dogs it's mostly about their genetics, and then we offer discipline as their training.
You've done border collie.
Yeah, I include border collies. I mean, most of us have sheep. We have some kind of stock dog, and I did some like if you've been out to the stock dog trials, I've done some competitions that way for about 12, 15 years, and it's a lot of fun. But I like the sheep the best, and our herders, they have dogs mostly for their friend, to be a friend, and just a companion. And maybe they can help move the sheep around, but we're trying to make fat lambs, and we're trying to go somewhere, but slowly. And we don't need to push anything anywhere unless there's a fire. And so I really discourage, and I think Dominique, who talked earlier, I think her dad doesn't even let their herders have a dog, but sometimes we need dogs just to get somewhere, but gently.
We use Great Pyrenees. I don't know what you use. I think we all use Great Pyrenees. They're amazing. There's a couple photos you'll see. We also use border collies, and with our targeted grazing business, because we're in fences all the time and rather confined in relation to range sheep operations, rather confined spaces, we don't often need to use the dogs normally. However, when there's an incident and the animals get out and they're all of a sudden in someone's backyard and they're calling me, this happened about a month ago. My herder, he's like, they got into this guy's yard, he's kind of upset, but I'm gonna use the dog. And the people called me, they were like, it was amazing. The dogs, they knew what to do, and he didn't even say anything. And I called him back, and I'm like, did you need the dog? He's like, no, I didn't need, no, there was like 30 of them. There was fine. He goes, but they loved watching the dogs. And they are amazing. They're very bright. They're very intelligent. They're a lot of work because they get in trouble and wander and steal, will walk with people back to their house and stuff. But they're very intelligent. It's amazing, yeah.
We got one down here in front, Dominique, wherever somebody is. I can't see well enough. They're coming right behind you with the microphone.
Earlier, you mentioned the kids coming up and watching the sheep and whatever. Do you have any programs that go into schools to educate these children? Because that is where the magic could really happen. And like you said, they go home and tell their parents. So do you have a program like that?
One of the major sponsors here tonight, the Idaho Rangeland Resource Commission, and they have and many, many states have these commissions. That is what it is. Its job is to educate the public, and they have a very strong program in the schools and with the younger children and whatnot, and also out on the trails. They have the kiosks out on the trails explaining a lot of this, and they put on programs, they put on camps, summer camps the kids can go to, camps that teachers can go to, and educate the teachers. So yeah, we finally, excuse me, developed some of that in the state of Idaho, and I'll let the others speak to it as well.
California does not have a good program for that at all, if you were to ask me. What we try to do is, because when we're grazing in urban areas, we do a lot of we happen to hit a lot of school areas. And we will often connect with the principal, and they'll set up a field trip days, and teachers will take turns walking their classes over. We also graze specifically for a lot of schools. In Marin County, specifically, there's a lot of neighborhoods that are built, you know, houses on top of houses on top of houses, and then they run right into the coastal range. And that coastal range is just, could be a tinderbox. And you can't get, and the time it takes to get a vehicle from the midst of that neighborhood out to the freeway in the event of a fire to evacuate is awful. They know they'll die trying to get the kids out of those schools. And in more than one, we have raised in 2 particular schools who are built right into that coastal range. The emergency evacuation plan for those schools, I was shocked to learn, is shelter in place. They know they cannot get those kids out. They will die trying. And so they aren't going to, in the event of a fire, because they're right up against those hillsides, they aren't going to try to get the kids out. So they use us to graze every year as part of a really broad grazing program. We're not grazing just that school. We're grazing a lot of the other properties along with it. But they need those kids to be able to safely shelter in place, because all the surface streets will be just log jammed with people trying to get out from their homes out to the freeway. So I'm pretty sure a lot of parents that send their children there don't know that's the plan, honestly. Yeah.
We do a lot of social media education as well. That's a huge part, and it's really taken off in the past few years, because the past few years with COVID, a lot of these schools were shut down. We were on a real circuit with our field trips and made stickers and tattoos and stuff. And then with COVID, a lot of those schools shut down, so that wasn't happening. But social media is big. It's a great opportunity to educate and to show what the animals are doing when they're not grazing, when they're not behind their house. You know, they have a full life. There's lambing season and shearing season, and it's a really neat opportunity to show what the whole life of the animal.
Question back here. Going back to the dogs, these remarkable creatures, would one of you like to tell us your favorite story going way back?
Good.
I've got one story I can say, and this was, it's been a couple years since this happened, but we put our sheep on the forest, and, you know, we knew how many sheep went up, and when we came back down, of course we counted, and we're out, like 90 ewes. And we go, crap, what happened? And so we talked to the herder, and he says, you know, I think, you know, about 5 weeks ago, you know, at this point, you know, that you know, I had some motorcycles come through the herd and split them up. I don't think maybe I didn't get around them. So we went back over there in that area, it's called Red Canyon, and we found a group of about 90 ewes and their lambs, appropriate amount of lambs, with a guard dog.
Yep.
And she'd stayed there that whole time. Her name was Betty. Anyway, she got a little extra guard dog. You know, we thought, you know, she's going to have to eat some of those lambs just to survive, and didn't look like she had.
Wow.
So, yeah. Yeah, yay, Betty, yeah.
I think that was the story you were looking for.
Yeah.
The only story I have back that far is when we were kids, we had a collie, and we were to stay within the fenced portion of the yard, but there was a barn that was down away from the house quite a ways, and that was where our focus was. And every time we'd get down there, that dog would go to the front door and rat us out. So.
My daughter is taking pre-vet classes, and she told us the other day that she had to memorize something like 20 or 30 different breeds of sheep. And my question is what breeds do you folks raise? Is there breeds in particular that are in this area? And how often and how do you use veterinarians with the sheep?
So the commercial meat operation, Talbot Sheep Company, which now is doing some targeted grazing as well, but is Rambouillet and Merino. and Star Creek, which is our sheep and goat operation, which is focused on targeted grazing. Those are hair sheep. They're called Dorpers, and it's not a wool, it's a hair, so there's no value. It actually sheds. You don't shear it, the wool on those sheep. And we use vets. We have a vet that comes out, sees at least some of our animals every year. Doesn't see every animal every year. We have between the two companies about 9,000 head. And so, but he comes out and sees some aspect of our animals at least once a year, usually more than that, but specifically once a year.
Since she's in med school, there's a lot of opportunity right now, especially in the world of targeted grazing, because those animals are in environments that are different than typical commercial sheep operators have been in for all these years. You know, rather than being out in the middle of the forest, they're in downtown of some city. And so the nutritional needs and supplemental needs of those animals are different, and there's not a lot of mineral products or supplement products available on the market right now that are specifically designed to address the needs of those animals and the nutrition that they're getting. And so if she would like to get on that, I'd be happy to be a test case. There's a real drive for that.
Yeah, and also, we would love more veterinarians
Yeah.
that are knowledgeable about sheep.
Yeah.
We're very, very, very short on those kind of veterinarians. It's just not where the majority of the profit might come from, or their business really comes from. So each year, we're always hunting up somebody that might have some knowledge in that area. So give her a boost there.
An attaboy.
Yeah.
One down here in the front row. Can't see if there's any others, but can't see that well either.
We can't see anybody. We'd like to.
So I was curious, you had mentioned that most of the sheep is out here in the Northwest and the West Coast.
West.
Why isn't it more national? What is it? Is it the topography? Is it the interest? What do you think it is?
You said Mike take this one.
You know, it's interesting in the sheep industry, and I think it's pretty well runs true today, but at least 10, 15 years ago it was very true. 10% of the people own 90% of the sheep. They're in the large range operations, and those large range operations require, to run that many animals, require a lot of country. And in the western United States, we have a lot of open country. We have a lot of BLM, we have a lot of Forest Service, state lands, as well as private grazing lands. And so the nature of the operations was to be large in order to be economically viable. And again, that's what led to 10% of the people owning 90% of the sheep. Yes, your point about topography in the Midwest, you know, there's smaller blocks of land where they have some rough ground along with the farming operation that maybe they can run the ewes on after they wean the lambs, and oftentimes they'll raise those lambs in kind of a barn operation or something because of the weather too. My partners and I, a couple of them were those Greeks, used to own a packing plant in Iowa and then a feedlot in Colorado along with our operations. And you know, it was a lot different back there. We had people that would back up to the door of the packing plant with a pickup load or a truckload, and we were one of the 3 larger packing plants at that time in the United States. But we also brought in a lot from the feedlots we had as well. But it was driven a lot by topography, and some of us in the industry have talked a lot about it. And I know, I think Rick Stott is here this evening as well, and he's with Superior, and he's talked a lot about you know, other areas that really haven't developed the sheep, like the Southeast. They've got some rough ground and whatnot too that could be proper, and you know, there might be opportunities in those areas too. Once again, for probably smaller flocks, those kind of things like that. But it has been driven by the land mass and by the willingness to take on risk, which comes with those large numbers too. Not only just the predator risk and those kind of things, but the financial risk that comes with those kind of operations. And the unfortunate part is, it was mentioned earlier about many operations not having somebody coming back behind them, and hopefully maybe some of this youth will come in and find those operations and be able to fold in. But if they don't, when one of those goes out, it takes a lot of smaller producers to replace it. And so our numbers continue to decline, unfortunately, at this point, but maybe there will become a point where we can stabilize it and or grow it as well. But that's kind of a long answer to your question.
But if you asked what state had the most sheep producers, it would be Missouri or Iowa. They may all only have 3 or 4 sheep, but they have the most sheep producers.
Again, the 90-10 rule.
Yeah.
10% own 90%.
Yep.
90% own the other 10%. I'm an accountant too, but. Is there any more questions? I can't.
Right here in front.
Oh, right here in front, yeah.
Again. It's my marketing mind going on, but everybody buys sweaters across the country, not just in the West, not just in the Midwest, New England, whatever. And I'm thinking, isn't there some manner that you can talk about sheep? Doesn't have to be real detailed, but the good sheep, what they're doing, and so people feel good, like you said earlier, about buying wool, a wool product. I'm from Chicago originally. The only sheep I know is a lamb chop, Seriously, I don't know anything about sheep. New England, you think about, seafood. Seattle, seafood, where I'm living now, but not sheep. And I think sheep, it's a hero. It's a hero animal, what it does for the environment. Yeah. And I think somehow that word has got to get out. I'm just throwing that out.
I appreciate that comment. We're getting the high sign. So I'm going to say quickly that I agree entirely, and we have many operations that are starting to come about. Smaller operations, the Helly family up in Montana. There's ones in Oregon. They're scattered out across the United States that are starting to work in those marketing type arenas for the product as well. So, no, good point. Well, again, I guess it's time we need to bring this to a close, but what a wonderful and insightful evening these ladies have provided for you this evening. Yes, please give them a big round of applause. I really appreciate everything that they brought. They came a long ways, and they're an interesting group. I'll tell you, I've enjoyed it entirely. So, I want to thank you on their behalf, and I want to thank you for putting up with me tonight as well. And I want to ask you to travel safe, please. However far you're going home tonight, please be safe. And God bless.